Young people are leaving church at an alarming rate. So what can your church do about it? How can you make sure that young people never leave your church? Well, simply stated, there's one thing you should be focusing on more than anything else. It's not more extravagant lighting or stage design. It's not a haze-filled auditorium. In fact, this one thing couldn't be more different from those types of aims. And the best part? We've actually got real data from churches on how this one thing makes a difference. And in this video, I'll share with you what that one thing is.
Well, hey there, and welcome to Pro Church Tools, the show where in 10 minutes or less, you're going to get a dose of tips and tactics to help your church share the message of Jesus while we navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm your host, Alex Mills, joined as always by the boss man, Brady Shearer.
Alex, we talk a lot about church and young people. I just want to read out a couple of episode titles that we've done in the past. We've done 5 reasons millennials have stopped attending church, how 250 churches are successfully reaching millennials. 8% of millennials say this is why they don't attend church. The signature way churches alienate millennials and Gen Z, the new social platform for Gen Z, 5 ways churches plan on reaching Gen Z. We'll have all those linked in the show notes. Suffice to say, there is a lot that we know thanks to data and research, as well as what real churches are doing and accomplishing and not doing every single day. When it comes to young people in church, there's no shortage of things that we can talk about. But if there was one thing, and one thing only,
What would it be?
that we know churches should be focusing on to reach young people and then to keep young people in our churches that are already there, what would it be? And that simple thing is what I'm about to illustrate with this story. When I was younger, I attended a really small Baptist church. It was on a hill that we used to toboggan down, sled down, whatever word that you're using, America or Canada. In the wintertime, it was painted white, this picturesque, really small Baptist white church. There was like 18 of us. There was no PA system in the quote-unquote auditorium.
Yeah.
It's definitely a sanctuary. and so what we would do is we would have one acoustic guitar on our good days, 2 acoustic guitars.
Nice.
Not plugged in.
One of them was a 12-string for sure. Yeah.
That's accurate.
Yeah.
And we would just sing with our voices and the pastor would preach. And it wasn't something that I really connected to as a young person. And as I was growing up, to illustrate this best, in the 8th grade, this isn't a brag, okay, it's kind of the brag. Okay, 8th grade. I mean, this again.
Right.
In 8th grade, I got the award for best athlete, but also the scholarship award for the best grades in the class.
Of course you did.
The problem is that when you are both smart and athletic, you are not accepted, at least I wasn't, by either group. So I was too smart for the athletes and too jockey for the smart
You
kids.
just didn't have a place.
I didn't have a place. And that translated also to high school. I kind of felt like, and now there's 2,000 people in this big high school. Where do I fit in? And then I got invited to a youth retreat in the 10th grade. And I go to this youth retreat, and I was wearing $1 plastic sandals with socks from a dollar store because I cannot begin to explain how bad of a kid, how just my personality. It's not great now, but it was just a cluster of badness in high school.
Yeah.
And I remember being at that youth retreat, and there were all these kids who seemed really excited to be there, really excited about God. And then there was this drum kit, and there was loud music, and everyone was like jumping around. I was like,
What is this?
What is happening?
This can't be church.
And in that weekend, my complete view of church changed. Not because of the music, and not because of anything other than the second I walked onto that bus, I felt like there was this group of people that accepted me for who I was, despite me and who I was being something that no one should accept. Because, high school Brady was, again, just a different type of beast. And it was belonging, and it was relationship. And not just belonging with the kids that were my age, but also relationship with the older leaders, with my youth pastor, with our adult leaders. And the best thing that you can do to keep the young people in your church connected to church is relationship, especially cross-generational relationship. And we have data on this. This comes from Barna. Those who stay in church versus those who drop out of church are twice as likely to have a close personal friendship with an adult inside the church. And that refers to organic friendships.
Okay.
But even if you're super strategic and intentional and dogmatic about this, and you do adult and student mentoring, the same pattern exists. In fact, it's even more likely when it came to adults that when it came to students, millennials in particular here, that had an adult mentor at the church, other than their pastor, they were 28% likely to stay in church versus 11% of the dropouts. So 3 times more likely to stay when they had a cross-generational relationship.
You know, Brad, we see this in church. If you're just a member of a church, maybe you don't always notice, and depending also on the size of your church, you don't always notice who's coming and who's going. You kind of have your group and maybe you don't take note, but as a pastor or a leader, and I'm sure most of the people watching and listening today are a leader in some sort of facet at their church, you take note of these things. You see new people come into your community and you watch them leave and you start asking yourself questions. Do we not have enough haze in the service? Were the lights not cool enough? Was the music not good enough? But what we've noticed in our church community is that the people who come and hang around for a bit and then leave and have no problems leaving, one of the common denominators we notice is that they were not plugged in relationship with anybody, horizontally in the church. They came, they were quiet, they kept to themselves, they experienced, they received, and they were able to leave because they hadn't planted any roots. But it's people who come to your church and get in relationship with one another. Like you said, youth getting in relationship with their youth leaders and older people. It's when you start to enter into that intimacy of relation between, one human to another, that face-to-face intimacy that we all crave, we all need. It's that kind of relationship that's going to keep you involved in a community, regardless of what music you're singing, regardless of what the lights look like, regardless of how much haze you have. You'll actually find that a lot of that stuff matters a whole lot less than even it did to you before, because you're not coming to be entertained. You're not coming for those things, but you're coming to do life and live life with the people there. And so when things come up at church that maybe you don't agree with, or things that you'd prefer be done another way, you don't just get up and leave anymore, because your roots are planted in and with the people who are at the church. And that can only come from relationship. And that's what we need to be investing in to see people become integrated into our communities.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to improve your Sunday morning experience, but I don't think it moves the needle forward as much as we'd like to think. And millennials aren't young people anymore. And this data is concerning millennials. The oldest millennial is almost 40 now. And I think we missed the mark. A lot of us did. I know I did with that age group, because we would think, well, we just need cooler this. Right. We need more improved that. Because what I love about this idea and this truth that relationship is what makes church sticky with all of us, and we can get this right with Gen Z now. Yeah. What's so amazing about that is that it doesn't require any money, and it doesn't require any crazy charisma. It doesn't require anything that any of us do not have. All it requires is for each of us to show up and dive into the messy aspects of life. And this is what church is meant to be, beyond any digital platform, beyond any part of the Sunday morning experience. It's relationship. Alex and I and everyone else in our church just being there for the other when we need each other, and when life is good, and we don't need each other when life is bad. It's just always all the messiness of life. And that's something that each of us can do, and we don't need to increase the line item on the budget to do it.
Yeah, you got it. I remember a few years ago when a lot of these conversations were happening. Well, what do we need to do to keep millennials? What do we need to do to get them in our church? And we always use that phrase, relevant. Oh, we just need to be more relevant. And a lot of our churches tried to be more relevant, and we found out in that pursuit that, oh yeah, that was never it at all. We completely missed the mark.
The faux hawk didn't do it.
Yeah, we just needed to show up. We just needed to be present. And we're learning, and there's this generation of young up-and-comers that are just full of life, and this is Gen Z that we're talking about. And like you said, we have a chance to nail this with them. We have a chance to be there for them and with them and see our churches grow and thrive in community, and this is how we're going to do it. It's in relationship.
A lot of the times we think community just happens. If people will show up on Sunday, we can count the butts in the seats. Right. Hey, we did community. And I think that's one of the problems. We need to reevaluate how we measure and how we evaluate what our churches are doing. And unlike most churches that track just a single metric, hey, butts and seats, maybe the giving metric, we think that there are 17 different metrics that your church should be tracking. Next steps is what we call them, 17 next steps. Each of them quantifies a different type of community, a different layer, because showing up on a Sunday morning, that is one type of community because it shows that you're willing to be around others. Yeah. And that's huge, but there are so many other things. We put it together into a giant spreadsheet. We call it this church growth calculator, the church health calculator. It allows you to quantify and measure how are we doing in a holistic view. Yeah. It's just one way to look at what you're doing with community and evaluate how are we doing now and how can we be better. It's a free download. It's linked in the show notes for this episode. It's the featured resource, and that'll do it for this episode of Pro Church Tools. We'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching this video. The next step for you is to subscribe.
And then your next step with your right foot would be to like the video.
Like and subscribe.